You're listening to Stealing from Wizards, Volume 3, Kidnapping, by R.A. Consul.
Chapter 24, Tea and Biscuits. That departure was delayed by the extravagant apologies necessary to convince the residents of the point that they were not under attack. Ms. Crawley used a clever diplomatic trick of promising to send a gift basket to the council to make amends for the disruption, which had the unintended side effect of half the council showing up to ask for specific items. Fairies flitted by asking for jams from particular shops in Bytown. A group of grim Fomorians implied quite politely that some cured meats from Elfheim wouldn't go amiss. And Luton kept popping up and asking for Blandland's junk food. Some of them appeared multiple times wearing different hats with the aim of getting a second request. The next hurdle was locating Charlie, who had wandered off with Uncle Zeke, a ferocious-looking troll with lichen-covered skin and claws-like scythes, who sometimes bought eggs from her farm. Escaping the quagmire of diplomacy took longer than escaping Niflheim. The final challenge was the actual departure, as their only means of transport was a pickup truck with nearly enough seating for 3 of them. It took considerable creativity and skill on the part of Ms. Crawley to turn the bed of the truck into a bed more fit for sleeping. She cleaned, fluffed, and softened the steel to create a padded compartment, and then conjured a cap to enclose the space. "I do miss having a wizard around," remarked Mr. Cook. They piled into the truck. The adults sat in the cabin to discuss important adult things, the friends rode in the back, and Henrietta rode inside Charlie's brain. Charlie demanded that they share their adventures, and was upset that they had had them without her. She described in graphic detail what she would have done to Phineas Hearn had she been given the chance. Her adventure was much less adventurous, though in her retelling she made her trials and tribulations seem vastly grander than theirs. When they had failed to return, she had embarked on an epic journey through the mostly imagined dangers of Detritus Lane to reach Bytown. Then, alone and unarmed, she had scaled the moderately large hill all the way up to the granite citadel, fortress of the Royal Guard. Upon breaching the fortress, she found she could not reach the great Sir Talon Dubois, as he had gone to the Blandlands, along with a good portion of the hounds. Undaunted, she had made a cross-country expedition to re-equip at her farm and mount a rescue mission of her own. "Your caseworker Sabine drove me," she said. "They'd already sent a Luton to tell my dad." She rolled her eyes at the audacity of informing her parent that she'd disappeared. Crow didn't remember dozing off. The night had been restless and the day exhausting. The soft bed of the truck and the rhythm of Charlie's stories helped him drift off without noticing. He was awoken by a raccoon pulling at his eyelids to check if he was really asleep. "Well, I'm not anymore," he grumbled at the inquisitive familiar. It seemed he was not the only one to find comfort in the back of the truck. Arthur was curled up like a cat, one hand over his face to block out the light and hide any changes to his appearance that might happen while sleeping. Charlie was splayed out like a starfish, occupying any space the other two hadn't. Crow looked out the window to find a scene his bleary mind had trouble making sense of. Their truck was passing through narrow streets lined with narrow buildings. "Why are we in New Camelot?" he asked his sleeping companions. Charlie woke with a start. Upon recognizing that she had fallen asleep, she made a panicked search of her pockets. She produced a seashell and, after careful inspection, breathed a sigh of relief. "Could you put this back in your bag?" she asked. "I keep worrying that I'm going to crush it. Oh, hey, where are we?" She banged on the window that separated them from the cab with the adults and repeated much more loudly, "Hey, where are we?" Arthur woke with the shout and had a similar question. "We're taking Arthur to his mother," said Ms. Crawley, after stretching a small hole in the glass so she didn't need to yell. "She's at the palace today for some kind of event, and Lucy is insisting that she needs to talk to her as well." Their progress up to the palace was slowed by an increasing amount of foot traffic. People were streaming up from the lower city to the Royal Mile, all dressed like they were going to a wedding. The truck was ultimately stopped at the gates to the noble quarter, but only for being insufficiently elegant to pass into that most refined of spaces. The guards also considered stopping the people from entering based on their clothing, But there weren't any official rules about the dress code, only a sense of what was proper. Jeans, parkas, muddy winter boots, and prison coveralls did not meet the expectations, but didn't technically bar them from entry. They joined the swarms of people meandering toward the palace. "What's going on?" asked Charlie of everyone who drew near enough for her to engage. The answers were varying forms of uncertainty. All they knew that there was some big announcement they wouldn't want to miss. Those willing to speculate suggested it may be news regarding the heir to the throne. It took physical restraint to stop Charlie from confirming their suspicions. "If these people think we know something, it will alter our already slow progress through this crowd," explained Lucy in hushed tones. "If this announcement does have something to do with Marie, it can't be something good. That Phineas Orne man said he'd done something to her. We need to get to Annie. She'll help me rescue my daughter." Lady Ayn was not difficult to find, but she was difficult to approach. She was in full armor along with the rest of the Knights of the Sun, standing guard outside the palace walls. Their presence, however, seemed unnecessary. A shimmering dome encased the entire palace like a soap bubble, defending it against magical attack. Around that was a barrier of flickering flames and crackling electricity, promising a speedy and painful end to anyone foolish enough to test the boundary. The message was clear. There would be no repeat of the coup d'état. Pushing through to the front of the assembling crowd, they managed to get in view of Lady Ayn, who stood at one side of the sealed gates to the palace grounds. Sir McCool stood by the other. Both stood proud and tall, sealed in their armor, acting as both guards and decorative statues for the event. The threat their presence implied kept the crowd from straying too close to the walls. A hushed debate among the adults in their company erupted about how exactly to have a discreet conversation with a knight who was actively guarding a palace. That question was answered for them, as Ayn caught sight of Arthur. Her armor melted away, as did any sense of duty. She crossed the empty space between her and the crowd at a run, slamming into her adopted son almost without slowing. Arthur was captured in a crushing embrace, which frightened the chronically inhibited people of New Camelot more than the fully armed knight had. It took her several moments to compose herself enough to notice anyone else, and upon seeing Kuro and Charlie, she expressed almost as much relief as she had for her son. "Are you okay? What happened? How did you get here?" She didn't give them time to answer, instead trying to stretch her arms to encompass the two along with Arthur. "Could we talk somewhere more private?" asked Lucy, or Ruby, or whoever she was. Lady Ayn took in the strange company the children were keeping and nodded slowly. "Craig, could you keep watch on my post for a minute?" she asked Sir McCool. He responded with a lazy salute. She led the group through the crowd and into a small cafe, which provided a nice view of the palace. "Closing time, Bernard," she informed the proprietor. "Is it?" said the shopkeeper. He was surprised to hear it, as he had several tables full of customers enjoying his fine tea and biscuits. "This space is needed for court business. Could you please close up at your earliest possible convenience?" Lady Ayn spoke with courteous words, but a tone that implied the civility was very near its expiration date. "You will be compensated for the trouble." Whether the shopkeeper wished to comply became irrelevant as the tables quickly emptied. None were willing to defy a knight, not even for the fine tea served in tiny cafes on the Royal Mile. "I'll just lock up then, shall I?" the shopkeeper said meekly, as his customers poured out the door. Door locked, curtains drawn, and spells laid to prevent eavesdropping, Lady Ayn sat at one of the small circular cafe tables and gestured for the other adults to join her. Her relief at the recovery of her son had waned and had been replaced by a deep suspicion of the people in his company. Had it not been for her trust of Charlie's father, there was a good chance all three would already be in chains. "Now, could you all start explaining yourselves?" the knight ordered. While the request was directed at the adults, Charlie answered before any of them had the chance. "Marie is the summer heir!" "That's absurd," replied Lady Ayn, and turned back to the grown-ups. "Yeah, no, it's her," said Marie's mom. Ayn narrowed her eyes, evaluating the woman whom she only knew as a clueless Blandlander. "Go on," she said. Lady Ayn listened to the story patiently, but did not find it very satisfying. "You kidnapped the princess," she accused, "and held her prisoner in the Blandlands." "I rescued the princess," corrected Marie's mother, "and raised her in the safety of the Blandlands." "Who even are you?" demanded the knight. I knew all of Princess Edain's handmaidens, and you weren't one of them. She had left one or two details out of her story. Marie's mother looked to her fellow escaped prisoners, silently inquiring how the already angry knight might react to a changeling in her presence. Kuro nodded without concern. Arthur gave a confident thumbs up, and Charlie grinned as she had no idea what was going on. Marie's mother shifted completely. She grew out neat tresses of mousy brown hair. Her fierce eyes softened, and her whole presence seemed to fade along with her motherly worry lines until she was a slight, young, meek waif of a thing. "Good evening, Lady Lamorak," she said in a carefully practiced courtly Tiernanog accent, the sort that stray servants adopt if they want promotions. "Nancy?" Lady Ayn gasped as if looking at a ghost. "You're alive? You're a changeling. You were Princess Edain's closest aide, and you were a changeling the whole time? Look, Annie, I know this is a lot," soothed Marie's mother, trying to calm the very dangerous woman sitting right next to her. "Do not call me that," she shouted. "Only Edain ever called me that." "Edain never called you that," she said warmly, fighting back a smirk. "She certainly did," the knight asserted, though her knightly poise was starting to rupture. She was sounding more and more like an angry teenager. "But only in private. We spent every Friday night together in her chambers of the palace. I was her personal guard." "Eddie spent every Friday night out in the Blandlands partying with Sarah," said Marie's mother, bracing for the backlash of breaking that news. "Sarah?" Ayn responded, horrified. "Lady Sarah York. Sarah Bottoms-up York. You let Princess Edain, future Queen of Tiernanog, go to the Blandlands with that Sarah?" "I didn't let Edain do anything," defended Marie's mother. "I was her servant, remember. I did what I was told." "But Nancy was like a big sister to the princess," argued Ayn, not ready to accept the changeling as the woman she had known. "Yes, I was," replied Nancy. "I loved that brat, but she was a brat. Once she discovered I was a changeling, I had to do basically whatever she said, and that included pretending to be her so she could sneak away and have some fun. There wasn't a lot I could do about it. One word and I would have been on a chopping block for treason. Neither changelings nor spies are very popular in this court of Tiernanog. I don't think she would have told, though. She was a good kid at heart." "I don't believe any of this," Ayn declared. "I would have known. She was my best friend." "No, Annie. Oh, sweet, too pure for this world Annie." Repeating that name, even in the gentlest and most empathetic way, was visibly increasing the threatening tension currently coiled around the knight. But Nancy continued. "You barely knew her. I was your best friend. My evenings with you were the best part of my week." "This is amazing," whispered Charlie, leaning over to share her feelings with Kuro. "I wish we had popcorn." Kuro, though, was paying less attention to the drama unfolding at the neighboring table and more to Arthur, who was being atypically stable in his appearance despite another changeling being in the room. "Are you all right?" he whispered. "Maybe," mumbled Arthur. "I'm not sure yet." Ayn sputtered and grumbled as she tried to salvage some small piece of the crumbling world of her youth to grab hold of. She apparently found something because she stared into the distance for a moment, as if she were watching scenes from the past replay before her. "Edain and Nancy were so close, they even got pregnant at the same time. That's what the people at court said. They defended each other from all the wild speculation about who the fathers were. Their babies were born only a day apart." "Yeah," agreed Marie's mother. "That wasn't an accident. Well, hers was, mine wasn't. We wanted our kids to grow up together, to be like sisters. We imagined them healing of some of the old feuds with the fairy courts. Idealistic nonsense. The coup d'etat showed us that. When they attacked, I had Eddie's daughter and she had mine. I was preparing the young princess to be presented to the assembled nobility. She was trying to get mine to go down for a nap." She grew quiet as she was overtaken by the memories. "I heard them storm the nursery, heard Edain try to fight them off. Heard her fail. Maybe I'm a coward for not going to fight for my baby, but I had another one in my arms." It sounded as though she were begging forgiveness more than relaying the story. "So I ran. I disguised myself as one of the attackers, and I ran." The impact of her tale was made obvious by the room's failure to respond. All eyes were on her, mouths open in shock. Even Autolycus had crawled from Kuro's bag just to stare, mouth agape, at the woman. It was not a reaction she looked prepared for. She had sat stiffly after finishing her recounting, appearing ready for anger, blame, or accusations of villainous changelings stealing children, not stunned silence. "Are you certain your child died?" asked Ayn very softly. "The papers said there were no survivors," Marie's mother answered. Then, as if starting to understand their reactions, asked, "Do you know something?" Lady Ayn glanced at her son, as if asking permission to go on. "The hounds kept the baby a secret for a while as part of their investigation, and a changeling replacing the princess wasn't considered a survivor." "She's alive?" Tears streamed openly down Nancy's face. "Do you know where she is? Is she okay?" Eyes turned from Marie's mother to Arthur. "Hi," he said and gave a weak wave. It's nice to meet you." "Hello," she said, choking on the sudden release of buried grief, her features slowly shifting to match the boy at whom she was staring. "Annie, you took in my lost baby?" "Not me," said the knight, also looking lovingly at her adopted son. "Talon did, but it was hard not to fall for a fool who would do that." "You really love that mutt, don't you?" said Marie's mother, with an affectionate smile spreading across her face, the corners of which were catching a few tears as they fell. "This is amazing," said Charlie. "I'm so glad they dropped me with my dad. Can you imagine? I probably would have had to go back to school and would have missed all this." Her commentary reminded the woman they had an audience and more pressing matters to attend to. "We need to get into the palace," said Nancy. She tore her eyes away from her long-lost child to refocus on the one recently taken. "I'm not convinced she's in there," replied Lady Ayn. "I've known the regent for decades. There's no way he'd be in league with Claudius Roche." Ms. Crawley, who had been sitting very quiet and still, as was sensible for an escaped criminal who didn't want too much attention on herself, chose that moment to interject. "Roche has convinced better people to do worse things. The regent may have no idea Roche is manipulating him, and might be too blinded by the return of the heir to think about it." The knight did not wish to admit the possibility of truth behind those words. "The regent and Sir Bors are the only ones still inside, and they would never let any harm come to a member of the royal family. They're loyal to a fault." The women had some serious disagreements about how safe Marie might be, and the best path forward, so the children were relegated to the cafe kitchen to allow the adults to fight in private. They busied themselves by feeding Autolycus. He was no longer shedding shadows, but he was much diminished by his time in Niflheim. He was small and frail, or at least small. Kuro wasn't convinced that his weakness was anything more than a performance, given how much strength he seemed to regain the moment a tray of scones was put in front of him. "It's not fair that you have two moms, Arthur," said Charlie, as they watched the raccoon devour a series of pastries. "I had to share mine with Kuro." Arthur was silent on the matter. "Does that mean Marie's your sister?" she continued. "Are all of her brothers and sisters yours too? Are they all changelings?" "Maybe," said Arthur. "There are a lot of stories about changelings stealing babies and replacing them with their own. But I don't know if they're true. That's what everyone thought about me, that an evil changeling had traded me for the true heir." He became smaller along with his voice. "I don't know what to do if she's actually a nice lady who thought I died." Refusing to be slowed by Arthur's emotional turmoil, Charlie pressed on. "Oh, I wonder who your real dad is. She worked at the palace, so maybe he's someone famous." "I don't have one," said Arthur informatively. "That's not how changelings work." Whatever plans were being hatched in the front of the cafe were meeting with increasing disagreement. The adults were failing to stay quiet enough for the friends to completely avoid hearing. "I think they're fighting about rescuing Marie," said Kuro. "Does she even need to be rescued if she's being crowned?" asked Charlie. "I mean, isn't that a good thing? Plus, my roommate will be a queen, which would be extremely cool." Unable to allow such optimism to go unchallenged, Arthur pointed out, "They'll probably move her to Summer Hill." "Well, then we need to go rescue her," Charlie said, her feelings on the matter turning on a dime. "That didn't go so well last time," said Kuro. He did think she needed help. Claudius Roche and Phineas Hearn were involved, so he couldn't imagine anything good in Marie's future. However, they had knights dealing with it now. If anyone could save her, it was them. What else were knights good for if not rescuing princesses? Fanfare in the square ended all conversation in the cafe. A chorus of trumpets heralding the beginning of the grand announcement was accompanied by a cannonade of fireworks erupting over the palace. Ignoring the dictate to stay in the kitchen, the friends ran to the front and threw open the curtains to see what was happening. In the palace gardens, within the shimmering dome, petals plucked themselves from the myriad flowers and began to float on the air. They swirled together and began to form a ghostly image in the palace courtyard. Almost as tall as the palace and clearly visible to everyone assembled beyond the walls was the form of Lord Albinactus Mordred, Regent of Tirnanog.
"I bring triumphal news,"
the whispery voice of the regent sounded out over the square.
"The heir, so long lost to us, has returned at last."
"Huzzah!" the crowd shouted, although individual reactions were mixed. Some almost fainted with relief, as if they'd been waiting for this moment their entire lives. Others scowled, expressing doubt about the legitimacy of the new heir. There wasn't a clear pattern to the reactions. Commoners celebrated and grumbled in equal measure. Nobles debated amongst themselves whether this was good news. Even the palace staff seemed divided. Some of the servants Crow remembered from their visit were cheering the loudest, while others were less enthusiastic about the imminent change in the management. The three weavers, particularly, seemed unimpressed. They stood together, watching the announcement impassively. The regent proceeded to tell a lengthy tale about the heir being raised in secret in the western wildlands for their safety, only to be revealed when they were of age to take on the responsibilities of the kingdom.
"That can't be Marie," said Lady Aine. "The regent wouldn't tell such obvious lies about her if it were. They'd be uncovered immediately. If it isn't, then they have a false heir, and my Marie might have already been—"
Marie's mother was unable to complete the sentence. The thought of her daughter being eliminated was too horrific to voice.
"We'll find her," comforted Aine. "We'll get Talon on her tail. There's nowhere in the realm they could hide her from him."
The regent's speech was reaching a conclusion. The knights had been thanked, the great noble houses recognized, and finally it was time.
"May I introduce to you your new queen?"
The image and petals swirled and began to reform from the top down. A visage, grim and serious, emerged, black-haired and with an expertly curled mustache. A ripple of restrained laughter passed across the masses, as the image of Sir Bors resolved more fully to show him holding the royal crown in preparation to place it on his new sovereign's head. The crowd held their breath as the image and petals expanded to show their new queen in all her glory. There, in full royal regalia, with a sweeping purple robe and cape, was Marie Akinwande. Her hair had been straightened and styled to match portraits of Princess Edane. With her glasses removed and affecting a royal overbite, the resemblance was clear, at least when rendered in flower petals.
"All right, I can admit when I'm wrong,"
said Lady Aine, as the regent began a lengthy ceremony to formally coronate Marie as queen.
"We need to help her,"
said Marie's mother, more insistently than ever.
"We need to stop her,"
said Crow, gaining sudden attention from all those around him.
"Roche said something about her speech, that I shouldn't miss it. That can't be good, can it?"
"We can't," said Lady Aine. "The palace is completely locked down. The defences have been installed since the coup d'etat are insurmountable. Unless and until the regent shuts them off, an army couldn't get into the palace."
While Aine and Marie's mother erupted into another argument about the best course of action, Kuro felt eyes on him from outside the cafe. The eldest of the weavers, standing beside her partners, had turned to look at him. She couldn't have heard them. Aine had deadened the sound, leaving the cafe to give them privacy. And yet the weaver cocked her head very slightly and raised an eyebrow as if to say, "That's not entirely true, is it?" Locked in her stare, he wrestled with his deepest impulses. Years of hiding, of running away from the merest hint of danger, of fear that anyone might find out who he was and what he had done, fought with his need to help his friend. Somehow, that raised eyebrow from a woman who had made him a kilt, who had told him he was worthy, pushed him over the edge of doubt and into action. "I can get in," he said.
Thank you for listening to Stealing from Wizards. If you liked our show, please consider rating or reviewing on iTunes. If you want to support this podcast or just can't wait for the next chapter, the full book is available on Amazon, Kobo, and Indigo. Our theme music was written by Camille Saint-Saëns, transcribed by Franz Liszt, performed by Rebecca Verdun, and used with permission. This episode was produced by Jim Tigwell.